Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our Indirect Taxes Revision series. Our today's topic is TDS, TCS, and returns. Very small chapters. But since Section 51 TDS has some amendments, it becomes important for your examination. Same for TCS also. So, chalo quickly, first of all, how to learn the rates of TDS and TCS, because there's an amendment in the rate of TCS. We simply learn it as 51 में 2, 52 में आधा. How do we call it as 51 में डबल 52 में आधा. 51 में डबल 52 में आधा, आधा as in half, which means section 51 TDS the rate is 2% and section 52 TCS the rate is 0.5%. Okay, so first of all, starting with TDS, which is tax deducted at source. Supplier can be any person but has to be a registered person. Okay, because there's a condition saying that if you are an unregistered supplier, in that case the recipient will not deduct your TDS, which means the supplier here compulsorily has to be a registered person. When this registered supplier supplies some taxable value greater than 2.5 lakh to a recipient who is specified to deduct TDS, then in that case this recipient while making the payment is going to deduct 2% TDS. 51 में डबल 52 में आधा, 51 में डबल 52 में आधा, which means section 51 the rate of GST is going to be double, that is 2%, total 1% CGST plus 1% SGST. Ma'am, we know section 24 I-9 creation compulsory registration. So here the recipient who is liable to deduct TDS is going to take compulsory separate registration under GST. So here ma'am, the recipient while making the payment to the supplier will deduct 2% on what value? Taxable value or full total taxable value plus tax invoice value? No ma'am, the TDS here is going to be deducted only and only on the taxable value, which has to be greater than 2.5 lakh. So let us say ma'am, there's a single contract, the value of contract is 7 lakh rupees. Now out of this ma'am, we are saying that 2 lakh rupees is the taxable value and 5 lakh is the exempted contract. Now in this case, tell me, will TDS be deducted? The answer is no ma'am, because TDS only gets deducted when the taxable value exceeds 2.5 lakh. Plus you don't have to check it invoice wise, we always check it a total contract wise. So let us say the total contract value is 18 lakh rupees, which is fully taxable, and you decide to issue 18 invoices of 1 lakh rupees saying that ma'am, see, every invoice is less than 2.5 lakh, it is not going to work. If the total contract value, the total contract taxable value exceeds 2.5 lakh rupees, in that case the recipient is going to deduct 2% TDS of the supplier. So you always have to check the contract value and not the invoice value. And also what you have to check is the taxable value of invoice, which has to be greater than 2.5 lakh, not the total value or not the exempted value. Okay ma'am. Ma'am, every person who purchases something worth 2.5 lakh or greater than 2.5 lakh is going to deduct TDS? The answer is no. It's possible you might have purchased a television or a fridge of 3 lakh rupees, but have you ever deducted anyone's TDS? No ma'am. Why? Because government has specified some category of people only who will be liable to deduct TDS while receiving supplies greater than 2.5 lakh rupees. So here ma'am, first is central government, state government, department, establishment, government agency, local authority. Plus there are some extra notified people like authority board set up by the Act of Parliament, example ICAI, any body which is established and the greater than equal to 51% control is with government, a society which is registered under government, then we say public sector undertaking. Basically all these are the government people. Local authority, PSU, government department, establishment, agency, body set up by the Act of Parliament, or body where at least 51% or greater control is with government. So all these things, we say all these people are normally the government people only. But now the amendment here says that we have added one more person who is liable to deduct TDS, which is a registered person receiving metal scrap from another registered person. Now this becomes important because we have one more metal scrap amendment in goods RCM. Goods RCM is not applicable for inter CA, but goods RCM is applicable for final CMA, where we say here, if an unregistered person supplies metal scrap to a registered person, in that case, this registered person will be liable to pay tax under reverse charge mechanism. We don't have any TDS concept here. But when a registered person supplies metal scrap to another registered person, in that case, if the taxable value of supply is greater than 2.5 lakh rupees, this recipient registered person will be required to deduct TDS. Tax normally is going to apply under forward charge mechanism only. So you always have to be sure who is supplier, who is recipient. URP to RP is RCM, but RP to RP attracts TDS, normal forward charge mechanism only. Okay, ma'am. So one is metal scrap people and plus all other government people when receiving taxable values greater than 2.5 lakh rupees will be liable to deduct TDS. Okay. Ma'am, Ministry of Defense is also a government ministry, but still they are not liable to deduct anyone's TDS. ऐसे चिल्ला चिल्ला के बता नहीं देंगे, we've purchased some vehicles, we've purchased some arms and ammunition. No, so we don't have to shout and tell anyone, and therefore no TDS required to be deducted by Ministry of Defense. Also, ma'am, if these people supply internally to each other, then also TDS liability doesn't occur. So let us say one PSU supplies to another government society, or one government society supplies to another local authority, or one local authority supplies to, let us say, ICAI. Now in all these situations, we do not deduct each other's TDS. However, there is only one exception. There is only one exception which says that if the recipient is a metal scrap recipient, if the recipient is a metal scrap recipient, in that case we say, if the recipient is a metal scrap recipient, then in that case we will say that they will deduct each other's TDS also. Because normally see, one metal scrap supplier supplying to another metal scrap supplier, it becomes an internal kind of supply only. And these people though as such are notified to deduct each other's TDS, right ma'am? So let us say, even if a PSU supplies to a registered person metal scrap, then in that case also one registered person supplying to another registered person metal scrap, TDS will be deducted. So any one of these supplying to a registered person metal scrap, then to TDS will be deducted. Otherwise than that, if these people do internal transactions, then no TDS is required to be deducted. Okay, ma'am. Procedures are very simple. You have to take payment or credit, whichever is earlier. So basically, even if invoice is not issued and you are making advance payment, then also TDS liable to be deducted. What you normally do after deducting TDS, the recipient who is deducting the TDS will file a return called GSTR 7 by 10th of the next month, and also make the payments of the TDS that you have deducted. This amount will be available in the supplier's electronic cash ledger. Not credit ledger. Whatever TDS is deducted is again given to you in your electronic cash ledger. Okay, ma'am. After validation, they will also issue you a TDS certificate, GSTR 7A. So they will file GSTR 7 to government by 10th of the next month. And once they file GSTR 7, they make the payment of TDS to government within 5 days. They will give this supplier also a TDS certificate. They will give this supplier also a TDS certificate under GSTR 7A. What is contained in the certificate? The general things like TDS certificate number, GST number of deductor, name of deductor, GST number of deductee, name of deductee, for what period TDS is deducted, what amount of TDS is deducted, what were the supplies, etc. etc. Ma'am, let us say I supplied for 10 lakh rupees. So 2% TDS. 10 lakh 2% TDS, let us say 20,000 was required to be deducted. Mistakenly, we deducted 2 lakh rupees. Mistakenly, 2 lakh rupees were deducted and also deposited to government. In that case, can we go and ask for refund of this erroneous excess deduction? The answer is yes. Either the deductor or the deductee, so basically the supplier or the recipient, anyone can go to government. Anyone can go to government and ask for the refund. Government will give it, no problem. However, let us say the recipient deducted 2 lakh of TDS instead of 20,000, but the supplier the deductee also got the credit of the same in his cash ledger, then after that you cannot go and ask for a refund, because understand, government has already given this in your cash ledger. Now you ask for refund also, it will be double amount that you are getting. So it's like if excess deduction is done and you have also not received that amount in your cash ledger, in that case you can go and ask for refund to government. If you fail to deduct or pay TDS to government, in that case, along with interest and penalties and everything, you have to pay the TDS amount to the government. If no, then your demand recovery proceedings can also be started under section 73-74. No TDS in following cases. Very simple. See, if you are supplying nil rated, exempted, non-taxable supplies, or supplies in which your recipient is going to pay tax under RCM to government, in these situations, because we say only pure taxable value greater than 2.5 lakh TDS is deducted. So for exempted, nil rated, non-taxable or RCM supplies, no TDS is deducted. Also, the provisions of TDS came into picture from 1st October 2018. So if there is any invoice issued before this time, then also no TDS on the same. And also we say that whenever supplier is unregistered, then also no TDS. Why? Because an unregistered person cannot have a cash ledger. So even if TDS is deducted, where to get the credit? Because you don't have any cash ledger. So in this situation, we say that if the supplier is unregistered, then also no TDS to be deducted. And the last important part for this chapter is that when supplier and place of supply are in same state, but recipient is in some another state. See, understand today. Let us say supplier and recipient both are in Goa, but supplier and place of supply both are in Goa, but the location of recipient, let us assume, is in Gujarat. So let us say Gujarat government organized some kind of a conference or seminar in Goa, and for that they booked a resort or a hotel or a banquet in Goa. So tell me, for booking an immovable property, what is the place of supply, ma'am? Where the property is actually situated. So the owner of the resort, that is the supplier, is in Goa only. Resort registered in Goa. Place of supply, being an immovable property, also becomes Goa. But who is the recipient, ma'am? Gujarat government. Value of supply, taxable value of supply was 5 lakh rupees, which means, ma'am, the TDS liability is arising. But still, are we going to deduct TDS? The answer is no. Why, ma'am? Because when supplier and place of supply are in same state, same duty, the invoice that you make is of C plus SGST of Goa state. However, the recipient is situated in Gujarat, which means the C plus SGST for this recipient is going to change. So even if we deduct the 1% plus 1% C plus SGST TDS of Gujarat state, it will not be useful for the Goa registered person in the cash ledger. You cannot then take the credits, and therefore government says that if supplier and place of supply are in same state, but only recipient is in some another state, in that case we say TDS cannot be deducted, because even if it is deducted, the C plus SGST will be different and set off won't be possible. But let us say, ma'am, supplier, place of supply, recipient, all three in Gujarat then. So here C plus SGST invoice, and also this person has the same C plus SGST, which means you can deduct 1 plus 1% TDS. But let us say, ma'am, supplier is in Gujarat, recipient is in Goa, supplier is in Gujarat, place of supply is in Goa, and location of recipient is Rajasthan. All three different. Then, ma'am, then also no problem, because the invoice here would be IGST. We always check supplier and place of supply to decide whether it is C plus SGST or IGST. So if supplier and place of supply are in different state, it automatically becomes IGST, which means the recipient, IGST is same for everyone, 2% TDS can be deducted. So simple, ma'am, if supplier and place of supply are same, but only recipient is different, in this case only TDS cannot be deducted. If all three are same, all three are different, or let us say, ma'am, this is state A, this is state A, but only place of supply is state B, then also no problem, because invoice will be of IGST, and IGST becomes IGST for everyone. Yes, so with this, here we say that the entire chapter of TDS under section 51 is completed. Hardly 15 minutes, you need even one day prior to examination to cover up everything. Okay, ma'am. Then moving on to section 52, which is TCS, tax collected at source. Again, we have an amendment here with respect to the rate of TCS. Earlier, it used to be 1%, but now it is 0.5 percentage aggregating total, which means 0.25 plus 0.25 percentage CGST and SGST. Okay. So what the provision says here, again the supplier has to be a registered person. The supplier has to be a registered person. Recipient can be anyone. Ordering through an e-commerce operator. So whenever the recipient orders from the original supplier through any e-commerce operator, platform, website. In this case, the recipient forwards the order to ECO, also gives the payment to ECO. So here we say that when the ECO is forwarding the payment, the ECO is going to collect 0.5 percentage TCS, again only and only on the taxable value. Now one or two things which are common under TDS TCS is supplier has to be registered. The 2% or the 0.5% that you apply has to be on taxable value, which means no TDS, no TCS. For nil rated, exempted, non-taxable, RCM transactions, all this remains same. However, what are the differences here, ma'am? For TDS, it is deducted only when the taxable value is greater than 2.5 lakh. But for TCS, you always deduct TCS whenever any supply is made through ECO. Only and only if the supply is taxable under section 9(5). Housekeeping, accommodation, transportation and restaurant. We've seen that for these four kind of services, ECO itself becomes liable to collect and pay GST to government. In that case, the TCS provisions does not apply. So only for section 9(5) e-commerce operator transactions we say that TCS provisions does not apply. Otherwise than that, always without any threshold limit, even if 10 rupee transaction is done through Amazon, Flipkart, Snapdeal, any kind of e-commerce operator, we say 0.5 percentage TCS of the same will be collected. For TDS, we have GSTR 7. For TCS, we have GSTR 8, which the e-commerce operator files to government. Due date is same, only 10th of the next month. All these things remain absolutely same. Okay, ma'am. Again, the ECO will also take a compulsory registration in every state where the liability arises, because section 24 says that all the TDS and TCS people will always have to. All the TCS and TDS and TCS people will always have to take a compulsory and separate registration. Now, three important things that you need to remember here. Three important things. Point number 1. E-commerce operator should not be an agent. See, who is an agent under GST? Who starts issuing invoices in own name. So let us say today if the recipient purchases something from Amazon, the invoice normally that you receive is of the original supplier only. Amazon just helps to facilitate transaction or maybe arrange delivery, etc. Amazon itself never becomes agent of the supplier, right? And hence the TCS provisions apply. But let us say that the e-commerce operator starts to act as an agent, starts to issuing invoices in own name. In that case, you cannot collect your own TCS only. Barabar. So if you become an agent and you issue invoice in your own name, it's your supply only and you cannot collect your own TCS. So always you have to be very sure that the e-commerce operator is not acting as an agent. The question might satisfy all conditions of TCS, but one small word, one small line that they've written that ECO is our agent, it will change everything and no TCS provisions will apply. So point number 1 that is important is ECO should not be your agent. Point number 2 that is important is payment should be routed through ECO only. So let us say today I order something online from Amazon. Now, while making the payment, let us say they redirect me to the supplier's payment gateway, or it is cash on delivery type of thing where the supplier only comes to give delivery and collects cash from me, which means ECO is not involved only in collecting and forwarding the payment. Now, if ECO has not collected the payment only, how can he collect 0.5 percentage from this payment? Not possible. So, we are saying that if the supplier, if the amount is directly collected by supplier from recipient, then also TCS provisions will not apply. The payment compulsorily has to be routed through ECO. So recipient gives the payment to ECO, ECO gives the payment to supplier. In that case, we say that 0.5% of taxable value without any threshold limit has to be collected. And the third important point is this collection is done on sale minus sale return. So for the throughout month, whatever sale minus sale return net amount is there, on that net amount we collect 0.5% TCS. But will we include Section 9.5, Hattare, housekeeping, accommodation, transportation and restaurant services? No, ma'am. So wherever 9.5 applies, Section 52 doesn't apply, and wherever Section 52 applies, Section 9.5 cannot apply simultaneously. Okay, ma'am. So whatever total supply you have made, minus if there is any sale return, excluding Section 9.5 supplies. In that case, on this net amount, we have to simply, without any threshold limit, deduct TCS at 0.5 percentage. Also, let us say, ma'am, in one particular month, sale return is more than sale, then negative figure it is going, no problem, you simply have to ignore the negative amount, there will be no carry forward. So let us say, ma'am, in January month sale was 100 and sale return was 140, so there was negative 40 balance. Now in February month the sale is 200, then I don't have to set off the earlier negative 40 first and then only collect TCS on 160. No. Any month figure goes negative, you simply ignore it. Next month again new fresh calculation starts, and on full 200 again TCS is then collected. Okay, ma'am. So no TCS in case of nil rated exempted non-taxable RCM transactions when supplier is unregistered and when supplies are covered under Section 9.5. No TCS is collected. This thing we have already discussed. So three important things for TCS chapter: 0.5 percentage rate. Supplier should not be agent. The ECO. Supplier has to be registered and ECO should not be an agent. Second, we say that the payment has to be routed through ECO only. And third, we are saying it should not be Section 9.5 supply, then sale minus sale return, on that net amount your TCS is collected. Again, you have to collect and pay TCS to government. GSTR 8 you file by 10th of the next month. Commissioner can do extension also. Again, all these details are available on portal, and just like TDS, the credit of TCS is also received in your electronic cash ledger only, not the credit ledger. Annual return GSTR 9B, same due date 31st December. Okay, ma'am. Now, whenever a supplier makes a sale, so let us say we have sold this mobile phone through Amazon. So the supplier of mobile phone will also file GSTR 1 or now 1A also showing the sales, and the e-commerce operator will file GSTR 8 showing details of this mobile phone sold via it. So now in this case we are saying that of course if this is the same mobile sold by supplier through e-commerce operator, the details of the mobile phone should match in GSTR 1 furnished by supplier and GSTR 8 furnished by e-commerce operator. Genuinely, yes ma'am. But let us say it is not matching. The supplier says the mobile is sold for 1 lakh, but e-commerce operator says mobile is sold for 1.2 lakh. Then whenever there is any discrepancy as such, the discrepancy is brought to notice by government to supplier also, to e-commerce operator also, and they have to, in the same month of communication, whenever government intimates them about this discrepancy, in the same month of communication, whoever is at fault has to rectify. If not, government will assume the higher amount to be true and the supplier will be liable to pay GST on the higher amount out of whatever they both have furnished on the portal. Interest, penalty, etc. will also apply on that excess higher amount. Ma'am, if there is any error or mistake while filing GSTR 8, you can normally rectify due date always everywhere it is same only 30th November following the end of financial year or actual date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier. However, all the errors and mistakes that you do have to be identified by you only in order to make rectification. Let us say department has issued any order under section 73, 74, they have started proceedings. Then in that case, you cannot say, "Arey shit, sorry, it was a mistake, let me rectify." No. Then you have to pay all the amounts and penalties according to whatever is mentioned in the order only. Rectification on your own you can do only when you are discovering these mistakes on your own and you are not pointed out by department. You can also, as a supplier, maintain stock etc. at ECO's warehouse just by declaring it as your additional place of business. If the GST authority wants, they can at any time call for information from e-commerce operator about you. that what sales you have made through e-commerce operator, what stock you are maintaining at e-commerce operators go down, etc. All these things government can ask to eco, and eco has to actually provide all your information to government. If no, eco will become liable up to a penalty of 25,000 rupees. Ma'am, is every e-commerce operator required to get registered? No, all the ecos who are liable to collect TCS will be required to take compulsory registration. If you sell through your own website only, of course, you are the supplier, you are the eco, you cannot collect your own TCS, so that is not possible. Then we say, ma'am, what about composition person? See, a composition person can supply goods through eco, yes, that is allowed. In that case, yes, TCS will be collected, but it is ineligibility of a composition person that he is not allowed to supply services through an e-commerce operator. This we have also seen in the chapter of composition, and hence this is not allowed. So the question of TCS does not arise only. You cannot, as a e-commerce operator, pay the TCS to government using a credit ledger. No, compulsorily you have to make payment using cash ledger only as a TCS collector to government. Payment supply consideration, whichever is earlier, you have to collect the TCS. Normally ecos become liable to take registration in more than one states where they do not even have any physical presence. What they do in that circumstances, no problem. While filing their GST REG, the GST REG form that they file to take registration, in part A, they can mention the state in which they actually want to take registration, and in part B, they can mention the address of their actual office or the head office wherever it is situated, and these both can be different. There is absolutely no problem, because let's understand, Amazon today has liability making supplies in all the states across India, but is Amazon having Amazon having a place of business in all the states? No, ma'am. So let us say Amazon wants to take registration in Sikkim but has no office in Sikkim. No problem. While filing part A of REG form, you write Sikkim in the part A. In part B, you can give your Mumbai, Bangalore, Ahmedabad, wherever is your head office, the head office details, and these both can be different. There's no problem. Still, registration can be granted to TDS, TCS people. And the last part says that, ma'am, whenever we have integrated ecos, so let us say recipient goes to e-commerce operator 1, who in turn goes to e-commerce operator 2, who is then connected with the supplier for supplies to happen. Very common, let us say you want to book a flight ticket today. You go to Skyscanner, Eco 1. Now Skyscanner in turn has, let us say, Make My Trip or Thomas Cook or some other websites listed, Agoda, etc., from where you can book hotels or flights or etc. And then they ultimately have the actual supplier listed on their website. So the question here is that, ma'am, when multiple e-commerce operators are involved, who becomes liable to collect TCS? The answer is the eco closest to the supplier. The eco who is closest to supplier, the supplier side eco, becomes liable to collect TCS at the rate of 0.5 percentage. But what if, ma'am, this e-commerce operator himself becomes the supplier? That is also possible. Let us take an example of Nykaa today. Nykaa is an online platform selling makeup. Now Nykaa sells makeup for Lakme, for Maybelline, for Plum, for other companies, and Nykaa also itself has its own makeup range. So I go to some another e-commerce operator platform which has Nykaa, Purple, and all the other Tira, Beauty, all the other beauty e-commerce operators listed on this single website. I go and select the makeup of Nykaa only. So the order goes to Nykaa. But Nykaa is eco, Nykaa is the ultimate supplier only. It is not forwarding order to any supplier now as such. Now in this case, of course, you cannot collect your own TCS. So here we will say that if in case of Eco 1, Eco 2 supplier, the Eco 2 itself is the supplier only, then of course the buyer side Eco 1 will be liable to collect TCS. To make it very simple, we say the Eco who is closest to the supplier, you cannot collect your own TCS. So if you only are supplier, you only are Eco, then the next person who is closest to you will be liable to collect your TCS. And with this, we complete very simply, very quickly, TDS section 51, TCS section 52. The rate is 51 में double, 52 में आधा. 51 में डबल, 52 में आधा, TDS 2%, TCS 0.5%. Here we have GSTR 7, here we have GSTR 8. Due date is same for both 10th of the next month. Supplier in both the situations has to be registered person only. In both situations, the amount is collected on the taxable value of supply only. Right, ma'am. Is everything absolutely clear and understood to you? Say yes, ma'am. Done. Then finally, we scribble the last chapter for today, which is returns under GST. Very simple scribbling technique we do. There are 2-3 amendments here which become important that I'll discuss in detail. Otherwise than that, there is late fees in the chapter, due dates in the chapter, which is all self-read kind of things, normally do not even come in examination. So starting with section numbers, we say the returns chapter starts from section 37. Section 37 talks about GSTR 1. What is GSTR 1, ma'am? A statement where I show all my outward supplies. Do I have to make any payment while filing GSTR 1? No, ma'am. It is just a declaration kind of a return where I only have to declare what are my supplies under GSTR 1. Now there are 2 amendments here, one with respect to consolidated invoices and second, a new form is introduced, GSTR 1A, which I'll discuss in detail after 2 minutes. Okay, ma'am. So section 38 GSTR 1. Sorry, section 37 GSTR 1. 38 omitted. Section 39 is GSTR 3B. This is the kind of summary return that I file where I show my total sale, my total purchase, RCM transactions, claim all the credits, etc. And then whatever is the net amount payable that I pay here while filing my GSTR 3B, full summary and everything is declared here. Not just 3B. So like for us normal people, we have 3B. Then we say for these e-commerce operator, we have GSTR 8, TDS people, we have GSTR 7, ISD people, we have GSTR 6, NRTP people have their own return. So all these kind of returns that we file fall under these sections. Okay, ma'am. But for normal people, 2 major returns that are important. Section 37, we talk about GSTR 1, where you do not pay, you only declare your sales, only outward supplies. But then 39 is now omitted by government, and section 39 now says that GSTR 3B, the main return, where you in a summary format show the figures of your full sale, full purchase, RCM, everything, and then what you are finally liable to pay is what you pay. Then ma'am, F for 40, F for first. F for 40, F for first, section 40, first return. So here you declare all your revised tax invoices. We've seen this in the chapter of tax invoices, that let us say today I become liable for registration and I apply for registration within 30 days only. Then in that case, the day on which I receive the registration certificate, it is irrelevant. Why? Because my effective date of registration is the original date only from where I had become liable, because I applied within 30 days. So now in this case, we say that, see, you can collect GST from people only after you receive registration certificate, but you become liable to collect GST from the effective date only, which is an earlier date compared to when I got the RC. So for this intervening period, what we do is we issue revised tax invoices. These revised tax invoices we show in section 40, which is first return after taking new registration. So F for 40, F for first, F for 40, F for first, section 40 first return. Section 41 we've already completed in the chapter of ITC. Read with rule 37A. This was about when my supplier files GSTR 1 but do not, when my supplier files GSTR 1 but no GSTR 3B on time. In that case, I can wait till 30 September, and if everything is filed, okay, otherwise I have to reverse my credits till 30 November. All of these things we have covered in the chapter of input tax credit. Then section 42, 43, matching reversal provisions, not applicable for you. Then talking about 4.4. If you see inverted mirror image of 4.4, can you see something like NN? Yes, ma'am. 4 is like this, N is like this. So, ulta, inverted mirror image of 4.4 is NN. This is how you can remember section 44 as annual return. This one return that you file once in a financial year if your aggregate turnover is greater than 2 crore rupees. If you have your aggregate turnover up to 2 crore rupees for any financial year, government has exempted you from filing an annual return. Don't worry. What is the due date, ma'am? 31st December, after the end of financial year, is the due date to file annual return, where now in a summary format you declare everything that you have done throughout the year. Any adjustment you want to show, your total sale, total purchase, total RCM, TDS, TCS, everything summary format goes in annual return. Right, ma'am. If your aggregate turnover is up to 2 crore rupees, you don't have to file annual return. If your aggregate turnover is greater than 5 crore rupees, then you also annual return is GSTR 9. Here we have GSTR 9C also, which is the reconciliation statement, a self-certified reconciliation statement that your books and portal data, everything is matching. This self-certified reconciliation statement, whenever you file your annual return, along with that only, you have to furnish this GSTR 9C only and only if in the preceding financial year your aggregate turnover is greater than 5 crore rupees. If it was less than equal to 5 crore, no problem. You don't have to file GSTR 9C. Right, ma'am. Then also we say under section 44, if you are these government people, establishments, departments where your audit etc. is done by Comptroller and Auditor General of India, then in that case also section 44 do not apply to all these government people whose audit is already carried out by the Comptroller Auditor General of India. Right, ma'am. Why to file a return every year? Arre, leave it na. So section 45 talks about final return, which is GSTR 10. It says that when you get cancelled, let us say I got my cancellation order on 10 December saying that effectively I am cancelled retrospectively from 15 November only. So we will say whichever is later, 10 December. From there, within 3 months, I have to file my GSTR 10, which is my final return. Tata, bye bye, good night to government. So what is the due date to file final return, ma'am? The day on which I receive my cancellation order. And what is the effective date mentioned in the cancellation order from where I am effectively cancelled? From whichever is later, I have to within 3 months file my GSTR 10, which is my final return. This was all about the types of returns that you have to file. See. So GSTR 1, we are saying if you are a person having aggregate turnover up to 5 crore rupees, you have an option to file quarterly GSTR 1. In that case, your due date is 13 after the quarter. But if you we say you don't want to take this option even though turnover is less or your turnover is more only, then you don't have any option. You monthly have to file a GSTR 1. In Barrett, the due date is 10, but however, by notification, as of now, it is extended to 11th of the next month. GSTR 1 is not required to be filed by OID, AR, Composition, NRTP, ISDY. These all people have their own returns. Composition person, GSTR 4, then we have GSTR 7 for TDS, GSTR 8 for TCS, GSTR 6 for ISD. So all these people have their own separate returns and therefore they don't have to file GSTR 1. Okay, ma'am. Also, let us say January month is going on. On 25 Jan, I know that for next 5 days I am not in the town only. I am not going to make any supply. Still, can I file my GSTR 1 before January month ends? The answer is no. You cannot file a GSTR 1 in between the tax period till it is not over. Only two situations you can, where your business is closing only. So my business is closed, registration cancelled only on 25 Jan. Then I can file no problem. Or if I am a casual taxable person, now the CTP people take registration for a very short term, right? Maximum 90 days plus 90 days extension, etc. So here we say that because these CTP people are registered only for a very short duration, we say they leave the state once their work is over. So before leaving, they can between the period also file GSTR 1. And second person, if the business is only closed, registration is only cancelled in between the period, then yes, you can file, because post cancellation period anyways returns you don't file. Okay, ma'am. GSTR 3B again same thing. These people do not file for 5 crore up to turnover. You have quarterly option. Otherwise, monthly due date is quarterly people 20 to 24 depending on which state you are registered in, and monthly people 20 is the due date. Then this we have covered in composition, NRTP, OIDAR people, ISD, TDS, TCS, all these people. Then annual return section 44 we discussed. 31st December is the due date. But if turnover is up to 2 crore rupees, you don't have to file. Self certified reconciliation statement, if your turnover exceeds 5 crore rupees, you submit with the annual return only. Then for TCS collector also we have an annual return. GSTR 10, that's the final return. 3 months cancellation or date of cancellation, whichever is later. GSTR 11 for UIN people to take all the refunds, etc. If your books, etc., maintained audited by Comptroller Auditor General of India, then also you don't have to comply with section 44, which is annual return. So all these things very, very simple, not that important for examination. We say that, let us say, ma'am, I did not file my return on time. Can I file a belated return with late fees, interest, etc.? Yes, you can. But how much belated is allowed, ma'am? 3 years. So whatever is the due date in all the sections to file the particular relevant return, from there within 3 years to at least with the late fees penalty, everything you have to file your return. After 3 years, department will not allow you to file returns. Okay, in exceptional circumstances, by issuing notifications, conditions, restrictions, they can. Generally, we are saying after 3 years from the due date, then you cannot file returns. Then department will do your assessment, etc., issue you orders, and accordingly you have to pay the GST. Okay, ma'am. Talking about GSTR 1, you don't have to like show ITCs and everything here. Only and only outward supply you have to declare here. All the kinds of outward supplies you have to declare here. For any B2B supply, be it interstate, be it intrastate, any kind of B2B supply where your recipient is registered, you compulsorily, of course, have to give invoice wise detail. Why, ma'am? Because once you file GSTR 1, the credit will be reflected in recipient's GSTR 2A, 2B. So for that credit to reflect, of course, you will have to upload invoice wise details only. But for B2C supplies, all the intra-state B2C supply, you can consolidate and give a total figure that in this entire month, in this state, we have made a total this sale. And for interstate supplies, if the invoices are up to 1 lakh rupees, you can club all those invoices state wise. But if any particular invoice is greater than 1 lakh rupees, then you have to declare it separately while filing GSTR 1. You cannot consolidate the same. B2B, so even 10 rupee invoice, you have to show separate only. Why? Because recipient wants credit. But B2C, intrastate, without value limit, everything you can club. But interstate, state-wise, you have to see that for any particular single invoice which is greater than 1 lakh, you keep it separate. Other than all those small invoices, you can club state-wise and upload it in GSTR 1. Acha, tell me, ma'am, even if we have not made any sale in the entire month or quarter, still do we have to file a GSTR 1? Yes. Applies to 1 also, to 3B also. Nil GSTR 1 and 3B you have to file. Returns are filed using this OTP facilities, etc. Ma'am, let us say there is some amendment rectification later on that we need to do. Again, the same time limit, which is 30 November or following the end of 30 November or actual date of filing annual return, whichever is earlier. All these things remain same only. What new they have introduced now is a new form named as GSTR 1A. What is this GSTR 1A saying? Let us say, ma'am, I filed my return. I filed my October month GSTR 1 on 10 or 11 November. Now, before filing GSTR 3B, before filing October month 3B on 20 November, I realized, arre shit, one invoice was missed out. I realized, arre shit, one invoice was missed out. I did not show this invoice in GSTR 1. Or let us say I showed the invoice also, but ma'am, amount is incorrect. There is some change that I need to do. I know that my 3B is yet to be filed. At least 3B, so I should file correct only. 1, I filed incorrect. Incorrect as in some invoice is missing or some detail need to be rectified. In this case, department is saying you have an optional method. Earlier, though, there was no option, only next month only amendment table you can do rectification. But here you have an option that before filing GSTR 3B, before filing GSTR 3B, after filing GSTR 1. If you want, you can file an optional return named as GSTR 1A. In this form, what you can do is declare your missed invoice or make any amendment rectification that you want to. The effect of the same will start to reflect in the same month in your GSTR 3B. The effect of the same will reflect in the same month in your GSTR 3B. However, very important, the effect of the same in recipient's GSTR 2B will reflect now in next month only. Why, ma'am? Because as soon as the due date to file GSTR 1 is over, the GSTR 2B is generated and it is a static statement. It cannot now change once generated. So what we are saying is that even if you file GSTR 1, even if you file GSTR 1A after 1 before 3B, the effect will reflect in 3B in the same month correct taxes you pay. But credit in the recipient's GSTR 2B will now reflect in the next tax period only. Right, ma'am. Also, one important thing for MCQ, if you want to change GST number of your recipient, see, if any invoice is missing, or let us say some taxable value I declared incorrect, tax amount I declared incorrect, that all I want to rectify, you can use GSTR 1A for the same period. Previous period mistake if you have, then the normal amendment tables in GSTR 1 up to this due date that we saw, 30 November or actual date to file annual return, whichever is earlier, that normal provision for earlier mistakes is still applicable. But we are saying that same month after filing 1, before filing 3B, if you want to rectify, then you can use this optional facility of GSTR 1A. For any one period, you get only one GSTR 1A. Right, ma'am. So here let us say I want to change the GST number of my recipient. This is not allowed. Only one kind of rectification is not allowed. So we say that if the change pertains to GST number of recipient for a supply reported in GSTR 1, the same can be rectified only amendment table through GSTR 1 subsequent period. This period, by filing GSTR 1A, you cannot amend the same. And for all the prior periods, we know still we have this same time limit, 30 November annual return, whichever is earlier, amendment tables of subsequent returns. Right, ma'am. You cannot file GSTR 1, or in case of QRMP, IFF, invoice furnishing facility, if your previous period 1 or 3B is not filed, or you have not furnished your bank details according to Rule 10A. What was Rule 10A? After taking registration within 30 days or first GSTR 1A, first GSTR 1 IFF, whichever you file, whichever is earlier, before that you have to give your bank details. So let us say government has given you registration, but you are not giving bank details. You have not filed previous period's return, or you have received an intimation under Rule 88C, 88D. What was the intimation under Rule 88C, 88D, ma'am? Under 88C, we were comparing GSTR 1 and 3B. Under 88C, we were comparing GSTR 1 and 3B. And under 88D, we were comparing the credit that we have taken in 3B versus the credit that is reflected in GSTR 2B. So here we say 1 versus 3B. If there is any discrepancy, you show more sales in 1, less in 3B. If there is any discrepancy in 1 versus 3B, then department will give you an intimation. You have a 7-day time to either pay the differential amount with interest, accept your mistake, or to give them a clarification if you have. So whatever you want to do, you do within 7 days. Otherwise, straight away recovery, even without giving demand order, straight away recovery under section 79 can begin, and until and unless you reply or you pay, you take any action after getting this intimation, before you take any action, they will freeze your GSTR 1. So today, if I receive an intimation under 88C or 88D, until and unless I give them either explanation or I accept my mistake and make the payment, they will freeze my GSTR 1 and invoice furnishing facility. Right, ma'am. And 88D is same to same provisions. Within 7 days, you have to reply. But this is only for the difference between 2B and 3B credit. This is between 1 and 3B sales that I show. And another difference here is, here straight away recovery starts. Under 88C, straight recovery starts if I don't furnish explanation or I don't make payment. But here we are saying, first they will give you a demand order under section 73, 74. Even if you don't pay after that, then they will straight away start your recovery. No direct recovery here. First demand, then recovery. Here we say straight away recovery proceedings will start. Right, ma'am. So again, section 37 discussed everything about GSTR 1, GSTR 1A. Section 38 you don't have to study. Section 39 talks about GSTR 3B. Again, same to same thing. You make payments, you declare all the summary format details in GSTR 3B. No invoice wise detail is required here. You make the payments, you file the returns using OTP, or you can also use digital signature certificate, etc. Even if you have not done any business, still filing of GSTR 1 and 3B is mandatory. You can use SMS facility to file a nil return. F for 40, F for first is done. 41 with ITC we have done. 42, 43 matching reversals not applicable. Annual return we have completed. 45 final return we have completed. Then talking about section 46. About all the returns we have discussed. Now talking about section 46, which says that if you don't file your return on time, we will issue you a notice that you are a defaulter to file return, and in this notice we will give you 15 days time to file your pending returns. If you file within 15 days, very good. Otherwise, your case becomes then later on open for best judgment assessment by the proper officer. Ma'am, of course, if we file late return, there will be some late fees applicable under section 47. Yes, of course. So here we say, this is the table. This is the table for late fees, which I don't recommend students to learn. If you want, you can definitely go through and learn if you want. Section 46 says that notice is issued electronically to furnish the pending return within 15 days, failing which proper officer will assess your liability under section 62, which is best judgment assessment. Then section 47, 48, 4 into 2, 8. Section 48, 4 into 2, 8, we say if you do your work on your own, it is half. If you get your work done from some another person, it becomes double. This is the just simple technique to remember section 48, which is 4 ka double is 8. If I don't do my work on my own and I get it done from a GST practitioner, section 48 GST practitioner, my work will get doubled from 4 to 8. Just a technique to remember section 48 GST practitioner, which says I have to be Indian citizen, person of sound mind, not adjudicated as insolvent and not convicted by a competent court, and plus I need to have at least some qualification. Like we say, I'm a graduate, postgraduate, chartered accountant, cost accountant, or company secretary. I have a degree from foreign university, which Indian university also recognizes, or I was a written preparer already for at least 5 years period when there was no GST, there was sales tax era, or I'm a retired officer from government department group B at least greater than equal to 2 years. So all of these qualifications, any of these qualifications I have. This is general. This too you need to have. You have to be an Indian citizen, sound mind, not insolvent and not convicted by court. This is too compulsory. Plus you should have any one of these qualifications. Then you can apply on the common portal that you want to get enrolled as a GST practitioner. Once you get enrolled as a GST practitioner, you can undertake all these activities on behalf of the person whose GST practitioner you are. You can file that person return, you can generate challans, make payments, do refund applications, do cancellation applications, do application for conversion from regular to compo, compo to regular, or we say you can file for amendments, etc. You can also represent that person in the court or tribunal. So all these things you can do for the person whose GST practitioner you are. Of course, anything that you do whose ultimate responsibility will remain the original person. So today, let us say if any demand order comes, I cannot say that return was filed by my GST practitioner, I don't know. No, even if GST practitioner is filing, it is your responsibility. You have to ensure that everything that the practitioner is furnishing is correct only, because it's you in whose name ultimately the return is going. Right, ma'am? And the last section for this chapter that we need to study is section 150, information return. Section 150 information return says that in order to check my compliance levels, what department can do is go to some independent third party. Department can go to some independent third party like, ma'am, Like department can go to government authorities, income tax authority, banking company, electricity board, local authority, registrar, GST network, or stock exchange depository, RBI, UIN holder, company registrar of companies, collector, etc. So basically we are saying that department can ask for my information. Department can ask for my information to any third person. That third person will be liable to give my information, otherwise he becomes liable for this amount of penalty. Ma'am, within what period information has to be given? Government will tell you, depending upon what is the type of information, how much time it will require to take out that information. Department will give the third person a time, that let us say you give us this information about this person in 1 month or 2 months or 90 days or 100 days or whatever it is. Within that period you have to, as a third party, give this information to government. If you don't give, government can give you extension also to that particular period. Extension cannot be more than 90 days once a time. So we are saying that if you are not furnishing information within the period that government originally gave you, they can also serve you with an extension not exceeding 90 days. Ma'am, let us say I gave the information within the period, but information was defective, not correct. They can give me 30 days time to rectify my information. If I rectify within 30 days, very good. If I don't do, then we are saying that they will treat it as I have not furnished the information, return only, and accordingly they can levy penalties for the same on me. This is all about a returns chapter. There is also one small concept here, which is quarterly return monthly payment scheme, where you file your GSTR 1 and 3B on a quarterly basis. But IFF, invoice furnishing facility, up to invoices of 50 lakh rupees you can show every month, because your recipient would be wanting credit. And also GSTR 3B you file on a quarterly basis, but payment you have to do on monthly basis only by 25 date of the next month. In payment, you in turn have two options. You can take self-assessment method, where you will think that as if you would have been filing GSTR 3B, what amount of taxes you would have been paying, that same amount you pay in self-assessment method. But in fixed method, you can simply pay 35% of whatever you paid in cash in the previous quarter for the month and two of the quarter, 35%, 35%, and after the third month of quarter, anyways total GSTR 3B you filed combined only. So you have these two options, fixed method, self-assessment method. Not very important, but yes, there is this a small concept of QRMP scheme also. To consolidate everything, I will say section 37 GSTR 1, section 39 GSTR 3B, F for 40, F for first, section 40 first return. 41 we completed with ITC. 42, 43 not applicable. 4 inverted mirror image annual return, up to greater than 2 crore only you have to file, and greater than 5 crore one self-certified recourse statement also you have to furnish. Section 45 final return. 46 they will give you a notice giving 15 days period to time to file your pending returns. 47 talks about late fees. 48 GST practitioner, and then section 150, which is information return. These are all section numbers. We also saw rule 88C and 88D comparing GSTR 1 3B and comparing GSTR 2B and 3B. In case of discrepancy, 7 days time they give you to either explain or to make the payments along with applicable interests. And here we complete all the chapters of TDS, TCS and returns under GST. Bolo. Yes, everyone feeling confident with me? Dil dil agag bom bom. Yes, then do share it with your friends. Subscribe the channel, like the video and comment down. Refer to all the revision videos that I've uploaded. Exams are very near. Make sure you use all the resources that are provided. In this time, you should be giving your best that you can, because it's just a matter of 10-15 days more, and after that it is a test of whatever hard work you have done in all these previous months and years. So make sure you do your best. Take care and bye bye everyone.